What, Levi Nazis or the Nazis would die?
Yeah, that's true. You would.
So,
we haven't been sleeping much. That's why.
What?
We haven't been sleeping much lately.
You haven't been sleeping much, all right.
The end of the quote.
Now, let me tell you first about grades for this course. Well, you're in luck. Everybody did badly.
We knew that.
All right. There's a distribution that went something like this. Let's see. This was 30, and so there was a lump of people like this, and then there was here was 40. All right, and then there was a 24, and then there were a couple of scores like this, and basically those were A's and those were B's. I didn't even add them up on here. I added them up somewhere else. Okay, and I won't pass them out right now.
Yeah.
I want to talk about them first.
People crying.
Hope you learned a lesson and you're not going to give us a final now.
There's no final, right? You knew that?
Yeah.
Okay. This class has now been approved. So what I'm supposed to do is to send a list of the grades in to them. Just I'll write that memo form and sign it, and that's how the grades come in, and they'll worry about it. The only record I have of you then, or the only people I know that are in the class, are the people who have taken this test. And if you don't get a test back and you expect to receive credit for the course, then you should see me, because as far as we're concerned, you're not among the living. So, I mean, there are people out of it, so we don't know the numbers, and therefore this is our record, as well as the assignments. But not everybody's done all the assignments, or some might be late. So this is the only thing we think is accurate. But I think it is accurate. No, actually, I did take a list off of the assignments, and then we made a sheet based on that list, and then wrote these on it. Everything was filled out, so I think we know who's in the class.
Did you ever get the assignments back?
No.
Some of them. No.
Oh, no. You've got copies, right?
No. How are they gonna? So what effect is each of these things gonna have on the final grade?
Well, for those who are borderline, it'll. I mean, if people do a really good job on the assignments, then they'll get an A, and then for those that are here that screw it up on the assignments, they'll get a B. And I assume everybody's doing it. Basically, most of you are doing reasonably impressive work. There's no reason to think that there won't be all A's and B's, and mostly A's. As long as you don't blow on this last one, right? The assignments are due today. However, there's a slight reprieve. You can turn them in by 4 o'clock on Saturday. To do that, you need to take them to John Swinson's office, which is
508-1.
near the elevator.
Elevator into the place in Stula. My name's on
Just
top.
put it in your mailbox in the mail.
Things get stolen from mailboxes and mailrooms. You can put them there, and I'll check, but
Drop them off.
I've had things ripped off. I'll be there until 4, probably all day long.
And he only has the shredder until 4 o'clock, so.
I want to cover 2 more items for lecture before calling it quits. The first one is a hidden service algorithm, which is in the book, and I don't think I talked about it, but it's a neat idea, and you should know about it, and it's called cluster sorting, and it's one of the earliest hidden service algorithms. I didn't talk about this, did I? Really? I forget when I say things sometimes. Let us suppose that you've got a group of objects. Now what we want to do with that group of objects is find some plane, doesn't matter what plane, that roughly cuts the distribution of the objects in half. All right, doesn't, in fact, if it has to cut through an object, then we might want to clip that object on the inside. So basically, we'd like to find a thing that roughly clips this in half. We then set up a node on a tree, and this node is going to point to objects. So this is the A side and this is the B side. The A and the B side. So we've got that one node there. Now let's just consider these guys here. Pick any other plane, it doesn't matter where it is, that cuts these guys in half. All right, so we're now on the A side, so we've got a new node, and we'd have the C side and the D side. Okay, this is a C and D. And then we're going to do this here, but now ultimately we end up with the object itself. If we have something more in here, we might cut it like this, 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 and this. So that on this side, let's move this over here a little. You know, something like that. You got this tree. Now, at any one time, we say a viewer is at some point. Let's suppose he was here. And we've got an algorithm where we want to have things go from back to front. Well, if I'm on the A side and want to consider the back to front first, then I just go to this node over here. I just want to consider things on the B side. In other words, I automatically know that everything that's on this side of the node is farther away than everything that's on this side. In fact, let me start on the other point, because I'd label it. Pardon?
So that's not true from where you drew the observer.
Oh, well, suppose the observer is here. Right? I'm on this side of the plane. So
There are nodes on the other side of that line which are closer to the observer than things which are on the B side. Look, the furthest thing on the B side, the closest on the A side.
Right, okay, I said it incorrectly. Right, Ken. I said it incorrectly. From what I can say is that...
Nothing on the A side will obscure anything on the B side.
That's right. Nothing on the A side will obscure anything on the B side. So now I consider the A side because I want to lay those down first. I now consider this plane, now I got the viewpoint which is on the D side, and therefore nothing on the C side can obscure anything on the D side. So I go down that node, and therefore I quickly get a perfect ordering on this set.
When do you stop splitting the scene?
Well, this is not based on objects, but it's whatever a convenient object is. Now, one algorithm was even proposed where you went clear down to the polygon level. Hard to do, messy. Because you've got to, because then you're cutting through things, and if you cut and you want to make that guarantee, and that's the whole idea is to make the guarantee, then you've got to cut a lot of things up into pieces, and you don't typically want to do that.
The nice thing about this is that you do it once. You don't have to redo it for a review.
That's right. This assumes a relatively static environment. You figure it out once. And I figure that's the case. You may have something, maybe there's a little thing that moves around within it. But essentially, you got the static thing. And then from then on, it's very trivial to figure out that perfect ordering. It's just a neat idea I wanted you to be aware of, so you didn't have to rediscover it.
I'm not clear how you really split up the scene in such a way that you can ensure that this property is true for every object in the scene. For instance, from where your viewpoint, right, where you have your star, you have these two circles on the D side, on the DA side, which one obscures the other, and so you have to have some way of ordering those as well. And it doesn't seem clear that you can always split them.
Well, in this case you can, of course, right?
Yeah, sure.
But you're saying, suppose we have a cluster that looks like a cluster that looks like this.
Pattern and screen. Yeah.
Well, these guys, then what do I erase every other?
Right.
How do I do that? Anyway. All right. No, in that case you can't. This only works on things that are separable. So if you want to separate those, then you have to cut them up somehow. Or if you did have Saturn in its rings, then something has got to be chopped up.
Right.
It's absolutely correct.
But also, how hard is it to find out that this is the case and find out, given a scene, what planes don't touch any objects and so on? Is that a trivial thing?
No, it's non-trivial.
Right. So.
But you only have to do it once. In other words, it's a tricky problem. It's not terribly tricky, but it's a tricky problem, and you solve it once. You also, you use it on gross objects. You're maybe talking about hundreds of objects, and there's probably an n-squared problem, too. Is that true? No, it doesn't have to be n-squared, but...
So you have a little, so that can do a high-level hidden surface illumination.
That's right. Well, high-order hidden surface ordering. For instance, we're thinking about a city in the clouds. Well, obviously, you have to run down the streets, right? The planes that divide them up into sections. And you do that once, and then you've got the ordering. Easy, easy, easy.
So, for example, you might have an entire building as one object, if it's...
Correct.
So depending upon the application you have, you'll have to decide what's the best point to stop using the log n sort and go to a bucket sort, double sort, that sort of thing.
Right.
Then you end up doing Painter's algorithm on the objects, the gross objects. So you have to draw in every building and then obscure it.
No. For one thing, you can't go front to back instead of back to front. This ordering works either way. You can go front to back. You can embody whatever algorithm you want over the thing. In other words, this is a useful tool to be aware of as a component of a larger system. All right, the next idea is completely unrelated to this, but we need to present it to you, so we're going to show you about streamline transformations. Alvy and I had a paper on this last year's SIGGRAPH, and there's always so much to be able to tell you about it. But, let's suppose that we have an image. This is the first case. We want to just take this thing and rotate it. And there have been several government contracts on hardware devices for rotating raster images in real time without aliasing. Now, typically what they are is you consider some scan line here, you've got all these pixels in it, and we want to rotate the picture, which means that scan line gets mapped into something over here. It's part of the rotation. Well, you get an aliasing problem here. You know, funny things will happen to that image. That's one problem, which is a very serious one. The second one is that you're going here in scanline order, but over here you're not going in scanline order at all. You're stepping down this thing. And of course, deciding when you step is the reason you get this aliasing problem. There have just been some amazing pieces of hardware built, believe me, I mean, they're just amazing. Trying to do some fancy filtering to get this thing going down here. Of course, this doesn't go in order, and therefore it's very difficult to get real time, because, you know, memories are typically structured in a way. All right, there's another way of doing this, and this was the discovery we came up with. The matrix to do that looks like this, CS minus SC, right? The cosine of the sine. That does a simple rotate about the center. In fact, you can break this matrix up into components. You can break them up, you can think of it as being broken up into 4 different matrices. And any one matrix might have a skew in it, or they might have some scale. So each one of these components has skews and scales only. So let us consider the following object. And so we've got a sphere, and we want to rotate the sphere. Let's consider that point we want to rotate. If we want to draw any point on it, then the circle, rotate the circle. Then the circle won't look any different after you've rotated it, which makes the problem easier, of course. Okay, we want to rotate that point. Well, what we can do, if we've broken this apart, is first of all apply an X skew to it. Now, an X skew means that any particular scan line gets moved along that scan line. So this point would get moved to here. But this point would not get moved. That is, the amount that is moved is dependent upon how high it is. That's what a skew does, right? So this stuff is left alone, and we find that the new image would look like this. That's the skewed circle. Then we do a skew in the vertical direction. All right, so now we're going in a vertical scanline order. That's our other concession to being a little different. We skew in the vertical one, so this point is moved over here. And now that skew takes us down to something like, let's see, this comes down, so it would look like this. Got a little, sort of wipe that out a bit. That would diminish the original too. Now at that point we do a scale. Well, if we do a scale in Y, then we're still going in scanline order. So we scale this thing up, and we scale this up to here, and we come down like this. But in order to do that, we're going to scanline order, right? Vertical scanline order. Now we go next scanline order, and we end up with a final object which looks like this. But if we thought this dot of it went to here, then it went down to here, and then finally over and up. All right, so that point has been rotated through 45 degrees. Now, I complicated that a little more than it needed to be. In fact, you can do the whole thing in 2 passes. You can always do it in 2 passes, turns out. So let's redraw this. You can have our original point here, which is get rotated. We skew it and scale it at the same time. So instead of getting moved to here, it gets moved to some other different position. So we're just going through scanline order, each one doing skew and scale on that line. Then we go through in this order, and skew and scale in this order to bring it down to here, and we end up with a picture in the right place. This therefore requires a memory that can go in either horizontal or vertical direction. That can be arranged, but we're building hardware to do that. The advantage of this now is that we can do elaborate filtering so we don't have any aliasing. Now, recall that for the aliasing that we've been talking about, we've been using filters that look like this. And I mentioned at the time when we talked about aliasing that we'd be better off if we had a filter that looked like this. Well, in this case, we can use this fancy filter because we're always going beautifully in scanline order. And in fact, that's one of the things we're having built. Lucasfilm is a machine for doing this. Now, it's not very exciting just to be able to rotate. Turns out that you can do much better than just rotate. If we have got a set of points, X, Y, Z, and 1, and we've got a transformation here, and even going all the way through perspective, all of this can be broken down into a horizontal pass and a vertical pass. So let us consider an object like this. All right, this is our original image. If we go through this particular image, and we do the horizontal skew and scale, then we end up with a new image, say that may look something like this. The lines may even be curved. And that's the horizontal pass that does that. So you wipe through and you end up with this new picture. Now we go through vertically, and everything gets moved up like this, and this may get moved up to here. So something like this. It goes to here. And what we end up with is a perspective projection of that original image without aliasing artifacts. And furthermore, we have done it in 2 passes through the picture. So this can be an elaborate texture. It can be anything you want. You whip through 2 passes for it, and you therefore got a perspective projection.
So the application for this is for things like texture maps. You've already rendered an image and you want to transform it, rather than taking a 3 or 4 space object and then doing normal transformations and rendering that back into 2 dimensions.
Yes, let me pick out a particular example of that. In a lot of the airport simulators, they have got thousands of polygons along the ground to represent the ground. But there's another way of doing it, and that is they could take photographs of real ground, orthogonal projections of it, and now they store that in a frame buffer. So that's one image, that's what the airport looks like. Now they'll run it through this thing, and we've got the image of the airport from whatever position we want. That is the perspective projection of it. And they can be of unlimited complexity because it's just that flat image. They can still put things on top of it. The buildings and the lights were needed for the airport. But all that textural stuff to make it look real, like it comes for free this way. So that's one particular application. The second application is texture mapping itself. Suppose we wanted to make a granite building. Then we have a granite texture. Now, the granite texture in itself would look kind of flat if you just mapped it. You'd like to add intensity to it. Well, this particular algorithm only works on things that start off being a unit square or rectangular. What can be done is, let's suppose we've got a side of a building, and we want to map, this is our granite building, and we want to map texture onto it, which is lighting from some local light source. We consider this back in unit square space. This is where our texture is. Instead of taking our object and projecting it out into image space, or object space, and then figuring out how the vectors, the eye vectors and the light vectors go against the vectors of the surface to get your intensity calculation, you transform the eye and the lights to come back to be measured against this unit square. Now against the unit square, you calculate the intensity all across the surface. All right, that's a little nicer in one sense, in that you're going across, you're going in scanline order. Instead of having something that looks like this, where you're going across calculating the intensity in this funny order here, we're now in unit square. Once we've got these intensities, and we also have the texture map, so here's the actual granite texture over here. We now take the lighting function of the surface, and we mix it up with the color of the surface. We mix those two together, and we end up with the new unit square, which is the lit surface with its texture. Now we take the lit surface with the texture, and we do this perspective transformation to stuff it out here, and we end up with the shaded image, all in the right place and looking exactly right. The advantage of this now is that since this is all in scanline order, it is not unthinkable to build some hardware, some fairly simple hardware, to do the shading on these things, and then finally put them in the right place, because all of this is done in, everything is done in scanline order. Now, in fact, that's what we're having built over there, is a machine that works in scanline order. It's got a very large memory, and it's got boxes. It doesn't have addressing in it. What is at the level of the boxes, you just send things to in scanline order, and it does things to them as they pass through it, and then back into the memory in the right place. Still going to be a fairly expensive machine, but it would be unthinkable otherwise.
What's fairly expensive?
Well, the memory is very large. We have 12 bits per pixel instead of 8. Like we've got 8 bits per pixel. We've got 12 for each color component. So there's red, green, blue, and then the transparency component. so it's 48 bits per pixel. The expense is that with that amount of memory and with that number of wires floating around on these pipelines, you're just paying a lot. It's hard to build something that big without paying a lot of money. That's the main thing. And each one of these boxes that may do one of these things is one card, and that's the cheap part of the system. Now, I realize I haven't given you enough detail on this to go out and implement that, but let me just finalize a few things for the course. For those who are interested in pursuing graphics, you really should get a copy of each of the SIGGRAPHs for the last 5 years, because there are several significant papers. We should have this book because they've picked out many of those key papers. And since I think he's coming out with a new version of this, I mentioned that before, which would be good to have. And then there are a couple other tutorials. It's nice to have them because they collect these papers. And the field isn't so great that it's not unthinkable to think that you have most of the significant papers. For those who are interested in pursuing graphics here, beyond this course, I guess as you know, they've now hired someone who will be responsible for graphics next year. His name is, quick, I forgot his name. Brian Barsky, from the University of Utah, who is well-grounded in math and knows the graphics. It's also possible to do something in conjunction with us. That is, if people want advice or so forth, then I'm available for that. I'm not exactly next door. It is an hour drive. But I can do things there.
Did you go back to JPL?
Yes, Jim is, about the middle of the quarter, he was back there almost full time. Essentially, he was only coming up here to teach the course for the bulk of the quarter. And so he will not be up here anymore. Therefore, it's up to me to grade this last stuff. So.
What kind of mathematics is it important to know?
Well, a lot of the emphasis here has been on the algorithms, of course, which is not terribly mathematical. You need to know how to be able to do a lot of these transformations, to feel fairly fluent at that. Although, quite frankly, whenever I sit down to do this, I've got to go back and rethink the whole thing. Some of it's starting to get pretty natural, and that's okay not to understand it fully. Let's go back and rethink. But you have to be able to do that. If your interest is in computer-aided design and surfaces, then there's a certain amount of math having to do with the surfaces. But that's only one realm of computer graphics. For a lot of these things, though, I mean, the more you know about math, it's just the better off you are. Any questions in summary? John?
I found that by far the most painful thing about these assignments was coming up with models to display and moving them around so that they look decent.
Yes.
Is there any? Do you have any insight on good ways to do that? How do people usually do that?
Oh, there are lots of mediocre ways of doing it. It's the sort of thing where you can sit down and you can write a program and generate simple objects, of course, and that's what you've had to do. You haven't had the luxury of being able to check them out in real time, which is a help. The next step is to have a program to build objects and modify them. To build really sophisticated objects, though, is a hard problem. There are systems being built, like we're building one over there. There are lots of tools that need to be made. There's some commercially available systems, and in general, it's just plain a hard problem. It's a very hard problem. So I mean, there are no easy answers to that.
Has there been any significant work in that field?
Yes, there's been significant work. To put together geometric objects Well, for that application, there have been several programs that have been written. As mentioned, some are commercially available, some are in the public domain. When it comes to free-form surfaces and not just putting squares and boxes together, but to put together curves and so forth, it's all kind of kludgy. Somebody will put together a system, they'll write a paper, people only half read it, and they'll go off and reinvent some of the same things. Again, it's an art, it's not a science yet. There is some significant work still to be done there. And people are starting to work on it. They have to. There's too much money involved not to start to do that. Other questions?
I think you only talked a little bit about the impact of Vlsi on computer graphics. How a couple of people have tried to put some of the various things that you'd like to have in hardware, but also very cheaply. Do you have any further comments on that, or?
Well, did Jim Blair ever talk about the Jim Clark's Vlsi chip? There may have been a seminar he presented on it. Jim Clark down at Stanford designed a chip that would do a dot product. Now, the dot product is an essential part of the transformations, of course, and of the clipping. The clipping, to determine which side of the plane you're on, does a dot product. So by the use of several of those chips, where the microcode for each one is slightly different, a chip set of 12, and it does what a picture system does, although not as fast, all in Vlsi. That thing is not fully working yet, but it's coming along. There are a few groups who are doing the obvious. That is, if you do have Vlsi, then there are a few things you might want to do with dividing up the task. Nothing sophisticated yet. When it becomes practical for students and small businesses to actually go out and have chips made, then they'll definitely be used. I mean, it's pretty obvious. Graphics is the sort of thing that can be partitioned up in a reasonable way, and if you can partition it up and divide it among little processors or chips that they can take reasonable elementary subsets, then it'll work, and that will happen. I thought about even taking that Stanford Vlsi course or the one here, but if I'm snowed, I can't think about it. And I get the impression it isn't quite practical yet. Not yet. Close. It's tempting. Pardon?
I need 20 graduate students.
Right. It's tempting, but too much else to do now. Go
Can you
ahead.
recommend a good hidden line algorithm?
A good hidden line. Well, that ENS one, and the Ivan Seller one I described in class, is actually very simple. It does tend to generate a lot of little pieces, but you label them as created edges, and if you don't have a huge database, then that's definitely the simplest to implement. And I could probably implement one of those in 3 or 4 days for hidden lines that would work quite well. Is there a write-up on that? Do you understand how that works?
Is it in the hidden surface?
No, I invented it after he wrote that paper.
No, could you go over that? Or maybe recommend?
Well, let's see. How do you get a copy of that? The problem is they patented it. So that, by reasons. Then it's part of a naval report. Let me think. The only reference to it that I know is in a paper that I wrote. I referenced I referenced the patent number. And so there's a paper I wrote called A Hidden Surface Algorithm with Anti-Aliasing in SIGGRAPH maybe 2 or 3 years ago. That references it. And you might write to ENS because they've implemented the thing, and I think they have to give it because it's in the public domain now. It's part of a Navy report. That's the closest lead I can give to it.
Is it completely described in the patent? Because we have a pretty good patent library here. once went down, managed to find some stuff.
Well, I don't know if you ever tried to patents or not. They're, and the way it looks to a naive person is that the purpose of patents is to disclose something without letting anybody know what you're doing. However, the idea is fairly simple. It's the one I mentioned where you just pick an arbitrary polygon, and then you take an edge, and you take the plane created from the eye to that edge, and you clip the whole world against that edge in the two piles. Then you consider one of those piles, and you take another edge from the same polygon, and you do the same thing. And you never recombine the piles. Each time you work on a pile, you cut it in smaller piles until you're done. And that's what makes it so simple. Go ahead.
I was going to change the subject. Could you say something about how you would do shadows and things? For instance, if you had a skylight in a room and you wanted to find how the sun reflected on the walls or something, I mean, how you would go about doing that. And that's pretty similar to how something would cast a shadow as well.
Well, the best way is one of these object space algorithms where polygons come in and polygons go out. And therefore, you run the hidden surface algorithm from the point of view of the light. I mean, you label polygons as to whether or not they're visible to the light. And so you've got a new set of polygons, which is larger than the original one, because some of the polygons have been split into two pieces. And then you can run it again from the point of view of another light, and then finally from the point of view of the eye. And then every polygon is labeled as being visible to whatever light sources you've got. All right, let me pass back this, and then this is the end of the thing. I've added this else upload to say if you don't get this back, then I don't think that you're in the course and getting a grade. Mecklenburg, Ken Keller.
Somebody he took the exam, but he's not in the course. No, he's working on third or fourth assignment right now.
Okay. Mark, does someone want to give it to him?
Yeah, I can do that.
Okay. Mark? DePay? Jane? William Lobenheimer? Mark Meyer? John? Michael McGreevy? Dan Fitzpatrick? Daniel Friedman? And Dave Bean? He's an undergraduate. Douglas Lennon? Mike? Hamachi? Steve Upstill? Oh. Right.
Do you have any idea what represents a good set of numbers on this?
Oh, that's right. You came in late. Yeah, they're clustered around. They're clustered around 28 to 32. All right. And people that do good work on this, well, so it's from like 28 to 32 or 33 are A's. Those below B's on this test. People that do really well in the assignments can move up. If they're below it, they can move down. I think the high was 33. You need a higher than that? Or was it 31? 32? I think it was 33. So I got 33? Okay.
Did anyone
So
do
a
well
couple.
on 3?
Did anyone do well on 3?
Yes.
A couple did, yeah.
Well,
Maybe I'll publish it.
yeah, zero has to be at least.
That was not an easy It's not an easy test. All right. That's it then.
Here's a